Hello and welcome. My name is Nate from Video Games Recon, and as explained last week, in this video we're going to be discussing one or two topics in a little more detail than usual from recent video game news, discussing certain topics as and when I feel the need. Wouldn't you know my luck though, in the first week of doing this new format, it ends up being a fairly slow news week. So, with that, the only thing of particular interest to me, and will be the topic of the show, is the rumours from Kotaku sources surrounding Destiny 2, and also what improvements we would like to see from the sequel. So, let's start off with what we know and what the rumours are before we get into my thoughts and opinions on said news. What we know about Destiny 2 is next to nothing, aside from it will be a reboot of the original game, it will be released in 2017 if it doesn't get pushed back, and it is fairly safe to assume and speculate a full release window, and although no platforms have officially been confirmed, it is also safe to assume that it will be available on PS4 and Xbox One. Now to the rumours. According to sources from Kotaku and NeoGAF, Destiny 2 is set to go for more than just a soft reset with the franchise. Instead, as for example the small but incredibly beneficial improvements in the Taken King DLC. According to anecdotal evidence, the upper management of Bungie are looking for a proper sequel to the original, as instead of an expansion, potentially even at the expense of old planets, characters, mechanics and activities. And in general, personally I'm fine with that, being somebody who for the most part enjoyed my time with Destiny in year 1, but struggled with many of its issues, for example story, progression, matchmaking and social aspects, etc. And although I very much wanted to like Destiny more than I actually did, it became too much for me to want to carry on in that ecosystem as it was. Which is why a fresh reboot is very appealing to players like myself who could see the potential in the franchise but fell off the wagon. Although it would be a shame to entirely get rid of things such as old maps and mechanics, but it might be entirely necessary to get rid of some of the game's systematic issues, as opposed to just plastering over them like in the Taken King, as comparisons have been made to Blizzard's Diablo 2, which iterated on the first game significantly but didn't carry over characters or content from Diablo 1, and according to sources discussed, all signs are pointing towards Destiny following suit and restarting from scratch. Although perhaps this could be needed to live up to the game's potential or keep it relevant to a mass audience, I could see how hardcore players losing characters and inventories they'd spent hundreds of hours on would be a shame and could really piss off the hardcore Destiny fanbase. If they have a good reason for doing so, I'm open to it, but they should at least give some special weapons and armour to those that have completed certain milestones in the game, as at very least a tip of the hat for their time spent. One upshot of a reboot is that the game would no longer have to be gimped by trying to compensate for last gen systems, opening up many gameplay and mechanics possibilities with no longer having to worry about the antiquated RAM restrictions of last gen systems. One of the rumoured gameplay tweaks is in terms of what's being dubbed play-in destinations, a new type of activity that is supposed to revamp how Destiny functions as a whole. The plan is for Destiny 2's planet areas to feel more populated with towns, outposts and quests that are more interesting than the mind-numbing patrol missions you currently have in Destiny, which I think is a great move, as although the patrols, bounties and public events became either boring as fuck or repetitive, I still used to enjoy doing what was essentially busy work, as I liked just chilling out and simply existing in that world after a hectic nightfall or raid, leaving me wishing the open world was a little more fleshed out and lived in, as although cool, and here comes that word again, racked with potential, it felt a little empty and clinical compared to other games that do this sort of stuff so much better, like the Fallout or Witcher series. The next big piece of news to come out of the articles going around the web is that Destiny's sequel will finally be available on PC, which for me and most people is a no-brainer. Why this wasn't a priority from the get-go is a mystery to me, as not only are you leaving money on the table, you're also ignoring an ecosystem that are extremely familiar with games in this vein, more so than console gamers, i.e. in particular with games like World of Warcraft, Diablo and so on. The only legitimate reason I can think of is concerns of people messing with the game and cheating, but these concerns can be mitigated with a little work and attention. Also, a nice little silver lining is that the new PC gamers won't be carrying around any baggage from what they expect the game to be based upon the past, be it both good and bad. Thus can take Destiny 2 on face value for what it is and what it will be. So, with all that being said, let's discuss what improvements and changes off the top of my head I would like to see in Destiny 2. I'm sure I could think of a lot more, but I'm probably already asking for a lot in such a short development time. Also, feel free to post your own ideas in the comments section. So, let's start off with gameplay in general and with combat first. Well, in my opinion, little needs to be done in terms of improvement, as the feel of the gunplay and game physics were always very solid and a redeeming feature of Destiny for me. Although there is talk of rewriting the classes, I don't think there is a need per se to throw the old ones out. Although some new classes would be nice, as would the option to change your class in Destiny 2 should you wish to. Personally, I would like to see the RNGs turned down a little bit, and reflect more your skill and time spent. But like I said, that's just a personal thing, I'm sure many people quite enjoy it. As touched on earlier, improving the patrol and submissions and open world in general would be a good improvement, particularly making the world feel more lived in as opposed to just having regular mob spawns. And having some NPCs to communicate and trade with out in the world as opposed to just in social spaces would be a nice touch. And as a sidebar, no microtransactions in a £40, $60 game, thank you. I personally don't mind aesthetic only microtransactions, but no microtransactions whatsoever would be preferable. Social spaces and interactions. Better and more meaningful social interactions and forums, i.e. some sort of chat system and dedicated meetup space with real people in social areas. Think the Mos Eisley canteen from Star Wars, but with Guardians and some sort of optional text and or voice chat. Perhaps with a missions board so players looking to do the same missions can hook up. Also, finding a way to improve reasons to interact and team up out in the open world with players, as the persistent world and meeting of random players felt mostly pointless and vacuous. Single player. A better single player experience overall, giving people more of a reason to take time out to be with themselves and do their own thing, particularly when their friends aren't about or when peeps just want to chill and not play so seriously. Also giving much greater support for lone wolf players in general who aren't interested in the multiplayer aspect of the game. Story. This has always been a sticking point for this game, as the story always felt like an afterthought, inconsequential and discombobulated, with many characters and story arcs feeling unrelatable. Well, as much as one can relate to a resurrected guardian made of pure light. So with the story going nowhere and thus creating my inability to care about anyone or anything. According to most people, big strides were made in this regard in the Taken King DLC. And although Rise of Iron may be a bit of a step backwards in this regard, I think that's probably understandable, with many of the key players from the Taken King development team moving over to Destiny 2, leaving what sounds like a skeleton crew to work on the Rise of Iron. The story for Destiny 2 doesn't need to be game changing and try and mimic games like The Last of Us in terms of its cinematic quality. It just needs to make me care about the characters and my motivations for completing the missions. And please, for God's sake, find a meaningful way of bringing the Grimoire cards into the game, as there's some gold dust there in terms of lore and world building that's being covered in regular dust just sitting there on Bungie.net that most people won't ever see. Spaceflight. And finally, some sort of spaceflight or exploration would be amazing, even if it is only relatively simple, and perhaps could be something akin to No Man's Sky's spaceflight, which would be fine as an add-on to the base game. i.e. doing activities like discovering new social spaces and trading posts, or even abandoned space stations, perhaps swarming with the hive, things of that nature. Like I said, it doesn't need to be overly complicated and would still include fast travel options, but would be an excellent addition to the world building, as the scale of the solar system, which was unrelatable and never felt right, and some simple space exploration could help with that. So, that was my thoughts on this gaming news or points of interest. Please feel free to discuss or even disagree with my humble opinion in the comments section and share your own thoughts on said topics. Just let's try and keep it as respectful and as friendly as possible, people. After all, this is just one numpty's thoughts and personal opinions. Anywho, as per usual, if you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share and subscribe for more BS of a similar nature. Thank you and goodbye.